Hello everyone, welcome to our second lesson in this second module. So today we're looking at adaptation to the environment. Um, to start with, we need to look at like the factors that affect where things live in an environment. And then we're going to look at something called the range of tolerance, how well things are adapted to different factors. So to start with then, let's have a look at some of the different factors. So there's two different types of factors that affect the survival and distribution of a species. And the first one are abiotic factors. So abiotic means non-living factors. And these are things that typically are or have never been alive. So important abiotic factors that affect the distribution of organisms where they are found include things like the light or light intensity. So this might be things like how shaded it is from the sun. So you get some organisms that are adapted to live in full sun and some that are able to live in shade, for example. You have things like pH, so how acidic or alkali the environment is. So this is really important for things like plants. So you get species that are adapted for acidic conditions, and that means that they are better adapted to deal with like a lack of things like nutrients. So these are inorganic nutrients, mineral nutrients typically. So this affects what plants can grow where. So we might get some plants that can grow in areas that are very high in things like nitrates, and others that can grow in areas that are very low in nitrates. For example, they might have some sort of special adaptation that permits that. Then we also have things like water availability. You get drought-resistant plants like marram grass that will grow on sand dunes that can deal with low, like very arid conditions, or plants like water lilies that can deal with absolutely loads of water, excess water, more water than they know what to do with. Okay. And then if we look at biotic factors, we've got things like, well, to start with, biotic factors means living things. So biotic factors, these are controlled by other living things. So food supply is an important one. Are there enough prey items for a carnivore to exist or not, basically? We've got pollination. So is there the right pollinator to ensure that a plant is pollinated? Some plants only can be pollinated by specific organisms. So some types of bean and pea can only be pollinated by bumblebees rather than honeybees, for example. Or others require bats or specific species of wasps for figs and things like that. Associated with this is seed dispersal. Is the organism available that can eat and then distribute with its waste the seeds, like elephants in a jungle? That like they have a very important role. Disease. This is really important that affects the survival of a species, especially when they come into contact with new diseases. And associated to this, we have things like parasites. And both of these might not be so visible to us. So now that we've looked at like the factors that affect distribution, so biotic and abiotic factors, we need to look at something called the range of tolerance. So all organisms are adapted to a specific set of abiotic and biotic factors. So let's say I have some sheep, or wild sheep, shall we say, and some of them are really woolly and some of them are less woolly. Okay, so there's a genetic diversity within my population, and organisms that are poorly adapted will die out. So if it's very cold, we'd assume the sheep that have less wool would die out, and the sheep with lots of wool would be warm enough to survive. Conversely, if it's actually very cold, we'd expect the well-insulated sheep, if it's very hot, we'd expect the well-insulated sheep with lots of wool to die out. They get overheated, and the ones that would survive are the ones with less wool. So if there's a change in conditions, then it affects which of this population will survive to carry on. And we can graph this, we can show this range in which an organism will survive on a graph. So we have our two axes on our graph, and along this axis is the environmental factor. So this could be temperature or light or prevalence of disease or predators or anything like that, or food availability. And on this axis, we have percentage survival. So how much of a population would survive? And what we see is a distribution where, as the environmental factor increases to a point where the species is able to survive, we see an increase in the population. We find a point at which there's the best or optimum level with the highest survival, and then we find it will decrease away to nothing as well as the environmental factor continues to increase. So this point here is our optimum or best, with the highest level of survival. Okay, and we call the area in which the animals are adapted to be able to survive is our range of tolerance. And so it's possible for the organisms to survive at any point between this temperature or light level or level of predation or whatever it is, or food availability, and this maximum here. And you have an area in which they are stressed. Okay, so where there's not very many of the species able to survive, less of the population have the genetic resources to be adapted to survive for that area. So at the ends here, while it's possible for the species to survive, it's actually going to be quite stressed, because only a few of the individuals would have that random genetic adaptation that enables them to survive in those conditions. So we find that populations with large gene pools have a wider range of tolerance. They're able to cope with a broader area of conditions because there are more likely to be individuals with that genetic variation that allows them to survive. A population with, and we can show that actually as a graph. So if we have our standard graph here like this, so we have our environmental factor, and this is our percentage survival. A population with a big gene pool is going to have a much wider zone of tolerance than one with a smaller gene pool, which is adapted to a much narrower range of conditions. And this means that our alternative population, this blue one, is more likely to survive, likely because it has a bigger gene pool. So there will be some individuals that can survive. And this is really important for when we're deciding how to conserve things, what factors we're going to change, and how big an impact that will have. Thanks very much. See you next time.